Angry residents of Riverlea in southern Johannesburg have protested against the ongoing violence linked to illegal mining activities. 5 illegal miners were shot dead during an alleged turf war between rival gangs at the weekend. Residents are now calling for urgent intervention to end all illegal mining in the area. Police are investigating murder. To discuss this some more, we're now joined by lead researcher at the Benchmarks Foundation, Mr. David van Wyk. Thanks very much for joining us, sir, here on SABC News.
Thank you very much for having me on the news. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak about this important topic.
You're most welcome, sir. All right, let's begin here. I mean, where there's illegal activity, we're bound to see violence because, there's no rules, there's no regulation, there's nothing governing anything.
Yeah, no, it's true. The fact of the matter is that we've got 6,500 abandoned mines in this country. And we are counting mines being abandoned all the time. Okay, so it is a real problem, and that mine abandonment often goes with the abandonment of workers as well at the same time.
Yeah.
People can't go home because they don't get their pensions. The UIF is not paid out. The silicosis fund is not actually paying out like it should be paying out, and so on. And this creates a crisis in the country because we're not planning for mine closure properly. And then when mines get abandoned, and all along Main Reef Road, you've got these abandoned mines stretching all the way from Springs right through to Klerksdorp and Stilfontein on the other side. Very often workers get left behind. And, the only trade that they know, the only skill that they have is to go underground and to look for gold.
Yeah.
Now we've got more than 130 years of migrant labor, where people came to South Africa generation after generation to work in the mines. And suddenly the large-scale industrial mines are no longer there. And we haven't planned for post-mining economics or concurrent economics, and we have not really planned for, utilizing the infrastructure that is left by the mines more positively for the benefit of communities in close proximity to those mines. So I really feel sorry for the people of Riverlea because they've never benefited from mining. They've never actually worked in the mines, but they've had mines all around them that have impacted on their health and safety all these years since 1965 when Riverlea was established. And now for them to sit with the mess left behind by large mining companies and to cope with this situation where you've got syndicates and so on, human trafficking and so on, is bringing people from Lesotho and everywhere else into the country to extract the gold that is left, which is no longer viable for large-scale industrial mining, but the gold is still there for smaller and medium-scale mining, but we've never planned for it.
Yeah, and residents don't stand a chance, when it comes to this sort of violence where, some of it might then be gang-related and they're calling it, turf wars. They're bound to be caught in the crossfire.
Yeah, no, they're bound to be caught in the crossfire because Zamampilo, right next to Main Reef Road, is right next to Horseshoe in Riverlea, and that's where the shooting is taking place at the moment. And basically, Zamampilo is an old mine site that has been abandoned, and all the mine sites along Main Reef Road are now informal settlements or squatter camps, and you've had the gas explosions there recently and so on as well. It's also an indication that we're not coping with the housing crisis in this country.
Yeah.
But the people of Horseshoe actually have the title deeds to their houses and so on. The guys next door to them don't have title deeds to that land. And those guys are now having a turf war in which there's all kinds of weapons being used, AK-47s and all kinds of other things. And people are dying in the crossfire.
Yeah. And, often we hear, and I wonder, if this is something that you would verify, and I know that people are wary to verify this, but people, will often say that there are bigger people involved in this whole syndicate, whether we're talking about law enforcement. It's almost like a whole mafia that operates in such a way that you have people who are really at the top being part of what you've called, a syndicate.
Well, if we look at Zamampilo and we look at George Harrison Park, both of which are being mined now that they've been abandoned, you have the Langlaagte police station is less than 500 meters from George Harrison Park. It's less than 1.5 kilometers from Zamampilo. It's just around the corner. And we've worked there for 15 years or more, and we have seen policemen come to take bribes and so on from people there. We've seen syndicates coming to buy the gold, and then we've seen the police raiding the Zamazamas, taking the money off them that they were paid for the gold and so on. You know, so really, we've got a really serious problem here, and it reminds very much of the situation on the Cape Flats with drugs, you know, where also drugs were infiltrated into those communities during apartheid, you know, deliberately to depoliticize the youth in the area, and it's now become a plague.
I mean, is that really the worst case scenario? I think you kind of anticipated where I was going, because I know you're involved, you know, in a number of these areas, and you've certainly seen what a worst case scenario can look like. So, you know, what could it look like for Riverlea? And I suppose, you know, if we're kind of looking at what you're talking about, when you talk about the Cape Flats, it could get there. And so, you know, residents of Riverlea are justified in holding these sort of protests.
Well, absolutely, because the Riverlea residents never benefited from mining. They never got jobs in anything. It's an area of very high unemployment. It already has drug and substance abuse anyways. And now you're bringing in this new element as well of this gold. You know, and very often one feels that the politicians that come and politic in the area actually are also interested in that gold that is underground there. You know, and so that Central Rand gold hole behind TC Esterhazy Primary School within 30 meters should never have been given a mining license. One wonders whether the officials in the Department of Mineral Resources that gave that very dangerous license right next to a primary school to an Australian mining company that never intended to mine, whether they're not complicit, because that hole just opened up the underground tunnels for underground mining, for illegal mining anyways.
And when you talk about this, you know, complicit state of affairs, do you get the sense that there actually isn't, you know, an urgency to get rid of, you know, this industry? I'll call it industry, the Zamazamas, the illegal mining. I mean, not so long ago we heard of, you know, young girls being raped by, you know, Zamazamas. So one would have thought by that point, you know, stringent measures would have, you know, taken place. We would have seen heads rolling, but, you know, we haven't.
I think we've got something like 26,000 of these artisanal miners in the Johannesburg area. And it's a problem. You can't really eradicate it using the police. It's not a policing problem. It's an economics problem. We need to close mines properly. We need to rehabilitate mines properly. And where mines are possible for mining by small-scale miners, we should allow communities to begin to mine those mines in a regulated fashion. And then we should create a central buying agency for the gold that comes out of there to cut out the criminals and the syndicates and so on. And we need to disarm these people. You know, where do the weapons come from? The weapons come from security companies. The weapons come from the police. The weapons come from all over the show. Weapons that were brought into the country by the apartheid regime from Namibia and so on, that found their way into gangs and so on all over the country. We really need to disarm in drugs, in small-scale mining, and in communities. So long as these guns are available, people solve their problems with guns. The other thing is that we need to also get the pension funds to pay Lesotho for those workers that work there. So that, you know, we are doing research in the labor sending areas at the moment, and we're asking people, why do you become a Zamazama? The guy says, well, I'm going to get my father's pension. He was never paid.
All right. Mr. David van Wyk, thank you so much for giving us some insight there. We appreciate you giving us your time here on SABC News. David van Wyk is the lead researcher at the Bench March Foundation.